maybe buy something from them and, then, message them and thank them, or I don't know, sort of to get into a world like that, like you kind of have to participate in it.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 78th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release weekly podcasts with people in the print world who are doing something a bit beyond the expected. So please subscribe on your podcast listening app of choice. You can find Pine Copper Lime on Instagram and Facebook, and you can sign up for our monthly newsletter with print news from around the world, all at pinecopperlime.com. We also have a Patreon page where supporters sign up at tiers that start at just $1 a month, and they help keep bringing you printmaking content every week. You can also get thank yous like stickers, totes, on-air shout-outs, so if that's something you're interested in, check out that link in the show notes. Hey print friends, we have merch, all kinds of fun designs to show your PCL support and make print jokes to confuse and or intrigue your friends and family. And if you've got any of those friends and family who you want to share Pine Copper Lime with, but they do not understand what a podcast is or how it works, we do archive all of our episodes over on YouTube. It makes for easy listening and also offers pretty good, but not perfect, closed captioning for anyone who wants to read the episodes rather than listen. Check it out if you're interested. Printmaking forever, shun the non-believers. This episode of Pine Copper Lime is brought to you by Speedball Art Products, who've been offering a diverse range of high-quality products to your practice since 1997. If you've been following along on Instagram, and we really do recommend that you do, you've no doubt seen their newest initiative in the print world, Speedball's Print Posse. Working with artists like our guest today, DeerJerk, they've created a brand new line of custom inks to push your practice even further. So head on over to Speedball's Print Posse shop at speedballart.com, where you can pick up a can of Mint Jerk ink and see your new favorite color. Link in the show notes. My guest this week is Bryn Parrott, who most of us know affectionately as DeerJerk. For this episode, she joined me from her home in West Virginia, where we chat about sneaking into printmaking class her freshman year at West Virginia University, how not having enough cash on hand to buy paper to print her blocks helped her on her journey to turn her wood blocks into the art object, the influences of working in a tattoo parlor, what the heck is up with Twitter, and the origin of her handle. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to get some ink on the brayer with DeerJerk. Hi, Bryn. How's it going?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me for your evening, my morning. And I'm really glad we finally get a chance to connect. I have admired your work on the social media and at, SGCI Print Austin printmaking events, and I'm just really excited to get to know you a little bit better and your work a little bit better. And yeah, that we've got to connect. This is great.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah.
So before we dive into some of the nitty gritty of your work and your practice, would you give yourself just a little introduction for people who may not be aware of you? And I always ask my guests to say sort of who you are and where you are in the world and how it is that you describe what you do with yourself.
My name is Bryn Parrott, and maybe people would know me better with my online name, which is DeerJerk. And I'm actually located in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I am a relief printmaker, carver. I make wood carvings as objects, and I do print them too, but most of my work is made as a solo object.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear the story of how you came to printmaking and then how kind of you saw your work sort of transition from the block being the matrix to the block being the finished work.
So I've always been interested in art, like even when I was little, and my parents have always been very encouraging. They're not artists themselves, but they're creative in their own ways, and they're liberal, fun, interesting, kind of weird people. So I think they just said like, oh, this is what you're good at, so let's go with it, And I was always drawing, and I started to learn like real basic printmaking stuff early because we live in Morgantown. We're close to West Virginia University, and when I was a kid, they had a program called Saturday Art Studio, which was it was grad students that were in art education, I believe. It might have been art grads anyway. I'm not sure if they could volunteer. It was a required, but on Saturday they taught like 2 classes, and they were divided into ages. And you could go in, sign your kids up for this class. And what they did was they sort of taught kids like they would teach them in college. So we did figure drawing, and we got to work with clay. We got to work with printing press, paper sculpture. Like they just did. So I learned a lot of things there, and one of them was printmaking. And so I think I just always liked that. And so I did a lot of that stuff at home through like middle school and high school, doing like hand printing. And I just knew I was going to go to school for printmaking, or at least art. But like, I was pretty sure it was going to be printmaking. I mean, they kind of don't let you decide right away, but I think I even like snuck into a print class early. Like I wasn't technically, I didn't have the credits my freshman year, but like it was a different system because it was 20 years ago, and you had to call in and have someone sign off. So it was like easier to sort of get into a class that maybe you weren't supposed to be in. But so yeah, I went to WVU for printmaking.
Yeah.
And it was great. I had the first 2 years I was there, I had Sarah Smelser as a professor. Not sure if you are aware of her.
I do. Yeah, I do know her work.
I would figure. I mean, seems like she's very prominent.
She's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, she's kind of a big deal. But then I never know. And then the last 2 years we kind of didn't have, there was some like shuffling at WVU, and they had a professor come in, and she didn't last more than a year. And then they had the head of the department teach my senior year. So, and then the year after, Joe Lupo was hired, which is, as a shame I missed him. This is sort of an offshoot rambling thing. Like, but I remember being a student when he was interviewing. I remember him coming around and meeting him. And then now I'm like friends with him years later, because I kept in contact with the print department on and off. And also my younger sister's a printmaker, and she went to WVU. So she had Joe. So the other thing is that I didn't have a lot of direction after that. Like I really liked working in the print studio. It was like, if I wasn't sure before I was in the print studio, I was sure when I was in there.
Yeah.
And I paint too, but there's something about printmaking for me, and I think a lot of people I talk to also do it. The process is so appealing, and I love multiples of things. Like in my life, I like multiples. Like, why have one when you can have two of something? So I think that is really appealing.
Yeah. Were you drawn to relief carving kind of instantly, or did you do a bunch of the different processes?
I mean, I obviously did them all because we were required to, and I was interested anyway. I actually did relief carving prior to being in college. So the thing I do now for profit or my livelihood, I did when I was in high school, which was carving a block and then having it be a piece of work. But I kind of did. I mean, I did not a great job of it, and on really bad wood, because I had no information. I was using the worst wood cutting tools. I was using like 1x4s, or like just like wood I could get my hands on. Like, there's not any money, like, really. And I don't know. I didn't know what was available, and what being in a studio, like a professional studio, did for me was understand what materials worked better. that you could use plywood, you could use things like that to carve into, and it was like worlds better, and the kind of tools you could get. So yeah, I definitely like carving. It's like does like scratch whatever itch that I have. It's like repetitive and obsessive and kind of keeps my mind busy. Or maybe I don't worry so much, I'm always stressing out about something, especially now with like the news.
Oh gosh, right.
Like
Yeah.
it's just, you know, awful every day. And I will say when I'm like working on something, I feel less awful and it kind of distracts me. So I've always liked relief carving. It's the textural aspect of it, and I like the tools, but I like a lot of the other stuff too. Like I really like silkscreen. I just don't have a setup for that at my house. It requires, power washer, and but when I go visit my sister, well, when you can visit people, because she's in Johnson City, Tennessee, and she's the printmaking professor at ETSU, and she's taught a couple other places too. But I try to do some silkscreen work with her because that's what she works with primarily, and so she's got the setup, and I really like a lot of the aspects of silkscreen.
Yeah. And then when you were kind of finding your way towards relief, at what point did you just kind of start to see the blocks as the art object? And then, because I know now, while you do, as you said, you do print your work, and you'll even, you'll print them on t-shirts or all kinds of different things. But I think primarily in terms of your creative practice, what I see from you is actually these beautiful carved blocks of wood that are being sort of displayed as the final product, but very much carved in the style of relief printmaking. How did that come about?
So it came about sort of because of financial reason. Like it was like a happy accident. I don't know if I like that phrase, but like because I left school and I toyed with the idea of going to grad school, but didn't really have the direction. Like I went and visited some schools and I kind of got intimidated that I wasn't going to be able to do the intellectual side of it. Like I wasn't sure I could defend. I don't know. Maybe I would have been fine, but I just didn't go for it then. And so then I started working like those crappy jobs, and I just didn't have access to a press, and I could have hand printed things, but I just started carving these images, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool, isn't it? Like, just I've always thought the block was cool, and so I ended up just like making them look more finished by, instead of just toning them, actually painting them, and carving them away, and for a long time, like for years, I graduated in 2004, and then I didn't start making, like, it's not a level of success to make money, but the point is I didn't have like a career you could define, like financially, I guess, with these until starting in like 2012. Like 2010 is where things started to change, but like I always did them, but I did like far less. Like the years before I started doing them all the time, I would make one every couple of months, and I'd paint some, but it was the reason I started making them is because I do like the way a block looks, and then I just didn't have the facilities or money. Like I didn't have the money to buy a press.
Yeah, well, and paper is so expensive. Like if you want to edition a wood block, I mean, you could spend hundreds of dollars on good paper before you ever saw a piece sell, So if you don't have that money to invest up front, it's really difficult to make it financially viable.
Right. And I was so poor, like I was making like $6 an hour, and it just doesn't allow for, you make some things work, but paying rent, and you're trying to eat, and like, all that stuff. And I wasn't able to justify, or could not afford a press. Like I remember being in school and thinking, I will never be able to afford a press. Like it's just not going to happen. And I like eventually Joe Lupa, this is years later, it was like, oh, you could come in and use the presses. But I was like nervous to do that because I didn't know him initially, and I didn't want to be that like person who's just getting, using something for nothing sort of. But I couldn't also afford to like take another class, because a class alone, like I got a scholarship in college, so it was paid for, which is a blessing because I didn't even know how much of a blessing that was, because just I don't have debt, and
Yeah.
and I stayed in state, which was a huge deal, and also it was 20 years ago, which was a lot cheaper. But I couldn't afford to go to school, like take just an individual class, because they were so expensive. And again, I think I've got off track, but I made the blocks because I could afford to buy plywood. Like
Yeah.
I could spend a little bit of money on decent, like nice veneer plywood, and make something that felt finished and hangable and like and unusual. I think, I know that printmakers look at that and they understand what it is, but like when you're functioning in a different environment, a lot of people haven't seen anything like that, or they are not familiar particularly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I started working in a tattoo shop, which also helped, like in 2008 or 9. And that's how I still made those things, and I started to make more art, and it was being around tattooers. Like I started to be in this environment that had always been interesting to me, but I didn't know as much about it. So I've learned a lot. I learned a lot while working there, and I was never a tattooer because I think people sometimes think that I was or tried to be. And actually never, in a different life maybe, but I actually very happy getting tattooed and just making art. I didn't want to be a tattooer, but I like a lot of it. I like it, and I met some amazing people and like very interesting people through that.
For sure. And, your style of art is really distinctive. And so it's the kind of imagery you make, you make everything from squirrels to Draculas to dinosaurs to Mothmen, which I love. But it's very much in your voice. Like you have a really developed aesthetic. And I also know that with tattoo artists, they can get that as well. Like they become known for a certain style. And so
Sure.
Did your experience in the tattoo parlor kind of teach you anything about developing this voice, or was that something that you came to just sort of through your own process?
I would say that it absolutely helped me develop my voice. I had a strong style before and always have. Like, I think that was one of my strengths. Like, is I always sort of knew how I wanted an image to look. Whether I could get there or not was another thing. Like, I never had a problem picking out like how I wanted to do something or how I thought I wanted to do something. But looking at a lot of, I look at tons of different, art and makers, and but tattooing is interesting because it also sort of resides in folk art too, because a lot of people aren't trained artists. That's just a thing. It's neither good nor bad. Like, a lot of people argue that like some people are, there does seem to be like a academic versus lowbrow war at times. And I think that both are just fine. There's good stuff in both. There's in both arenas, and
Yeah,
not one is not better than the other.
absolutely.
But I do enjoy a lot of folk art from like any particular background. Like could be any part of the world, so tattooing does have a lot of that in it. And what I learned from it is that to make like good tattoos, or what I think are good tattoos, because that differ, people feel differently. You kind of gotta make like a really sort of iconic looking thing, like something you can. If you're putting a tattoo on someone, you want people to be able to know what it is from a decent distance, and it's real intentional, something about it, like, or at least the style I'm interested in, which is often bold. A lot of the imagery that's in the old flash is appealing to me, and I think tried to apply that to what I did, and I did a lot of like tattoo related imagery. In fact, that's what it's weird. I do have a moment where I can place where I said, I can remember sitting in the tattoo shop because I just worked the counter, and I was looking at this old piece of flash. It's like a Sailor Jerry piece of flash, a very standard thing in a shop. And it's a woman with a flower in her hair, and she has a long ponytail to the side, and it's real simple. And I will always like that image. And I was like, I wonder, like, I remember thinking, I was like, I wonder if people would buy that image or images like it if it were carved in wood the way I do. Like, I wonder if that would, I wonder if I could get tattooers interested. They buy a lot of artwork, at least the good ones do.
Yeah.
Tattooing has levels of, there's some really interesting, really talented people, and there's some really terrible people too. But
yeah.
And so like I started carving these images, and people responded very positively. And it was like, I remember selling a couple, and it was like the most money I'd made in one.
Right.
And it wasn't that much money. But it was like, I was like, oh my God, I can buy like an iPad now. If I don't even have a computer, it was like this big deal. Like I remember buying that iPad, and like it was painful because it was like all this money, but I could finally see like an avenue, I guess, for sort of actually making a living with art, which I had somewhat considered like that wasn't going to happen. Like I'd always make art and I'd always do it, but I didn't know. I thought maybe I'd always be stuck like working behind a counter.
Yep.
For not very much money. And the tattoo shop did really help me. And I was there for like 8 years. And, it's the reason I got to travel a lot. I had booths at tattoo conventions. Tattooers would get like commissioned work, and then they would tell their friends. It's a big web. And
sure. Yeah.
It got me a lot of things. Very appreciative of that. Like I had shows because of that. Like it's really cool. And I think maybe I've gotten away from sort of tattoo imagery more in the last few years, like doing like things that are like look more maybe less referenced, because I did a lot of like taking a tattoo image and then like manipulating it into making it look like something I would make, or doing a lot of commission work, which is obviously sort of being told what to do, which was another thing I realized. It was like, I can make a living if people love themselves, and they love to tell people what to do. And I mean, not in a mean way, but like, people want the thing that's specific to them, and they'll pay for that. And so I did lots of tattoo shop signs, and I did lots of stuff, pet portraits, but I always tried to make them something that I would have in a portfolio no matter what.
Right.
But I ran my wood cutting like a tattooer did. Like I would draw something, and then I would like manipulate the image a little bit. Like I just, I had a stencil even that laid on the wood, and like I just kind of, if that makes any sense, like I sort of approached carving a block sort of more like a tattooer approaches it, for a time anyway. But it was also mixed with, the experience I have working in a print studio.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really interesting insight into your process, because particularly doing commissioned work, I mean, that's in a way what tattooing so much is. And of course,
right.
There's flash, right? But even then, someone might ask for a change, or like you have to make it to where they want on their body. It might be a little bit different. And then also, people come in and they say like, I want, whatever it is that they want. And the tattoo artist has to make it work but also add their own voice as well, particularly if people who have these strong styles and someone who's going to see them specifically, it's because they want to see that voice in the finished product. So it really makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
It was it was very helpful, and it exposed me to a lot of people that I probably wouldn't have known otherwise. And yeah, I mean, I'm still friends with tons of people, and I still participate in, like, well, you know, other than the pandemic, but
Right.
I go to go to conventions, and you generally will booth with tattooers and sell woodcuts and prints and things like that, and have some of my best friendships from that group
Yeah.
of people. And I think, yeah, there's like and I see, and more I see crossover with tattooing and printmaking. There's a lot of, like, I see it happening more, I think. Like, I think, like, like Raking Light,
Mm-hmm.
and they always have, I remember, like, years ago, them starting up, or at least early on, maybe, and that mostly who they worked with, from what I could tell, was tattooers.
Yeah,
So,
actually, they've been on the podcast.
oh, nice.
Andrew from Raking Light is a guest, and I know him because my husband Tim Pauschak was, when we were in Sydney last year. He was working with Andrew to work with Sydney tattoo artists, so he actually did
Oh, okay.
some printing for them. But yeah, it's a really brilliant idea, I think, because tattoo artists are artists, and people follow them. And in the world of Instagram, of course, you can follow a tattoo artist who's on the other side of the world, like in Sydney, that you may never get a chance to get any tattoos from them because you're thousands and
Right.
thousands of kilometers apart. But you could buy a silkscreen from them, and you can have a part of this artist that you admire in your home. And so it really does seem like a really natural connection, particularly when it comes to creating a multiple with a master printer and then getting to spread that work out. And if you can't have it on your body, you can have it on your wall, and you can still have it in
Yeah.
your life. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do beautiful work. Like, everything that I've seen, is, they obviously pick great people, and then the work they produce is always gorgeous.
Definitely, definitely. And I guess, and speaking of the sort of like Instagram, getting your work out there, you have a very beautiful Instagram account, and a good number of followers. Do you have any advice for young artists, young printmakers out there who are looking at kind of curating or producing something that really helps them get their work out there, like in a certain way? Because I would guess that a lot of I know that you do sell through your IG, and it looks like it's pretty successful, because I can, usually by the time I see like, oh, there's a block for sale, it's already gone. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Instagram is, that was the other thing I was going to mention, is Instagram is, I sound like I'm advertising for them, and I'm not, but like, I got on there like in like 2010 as just like this weird app and there was like not very many people on there.
mm-hmm.
And I ended up making friends. Like, that was another thing. Became close with people who were tattooers and some artists, and it propelled the career I have. Like, it allowed me something I wasn't sure I'd ever get. Like, because before, you had to be in a gallery, and you had
Mm-hmm.
to get any attention, you'd have to go somewhere, and those things are valid, definitely. But now I think artists have a lot more control and can dictate a lot more, because they have tools like Instagram, and you can put your work out there and get 100% of the profit.
Yep.
And then I love galleries, but and I've worked with varying galleries, and some have been great and some have been awful.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're awful, it makes the argument like, do I really want to send work somewhere where you're going to take a cut and do nothing for me?
Yep.
But anyway, like Instagram, I think I got a lot of followers. Also, like, part of that is that I was on there so early, and it functioned a different way. Like, you could gain so fast, or you could gain faster, and there was no algorithm, and it just was a much more simple app. It was wonderful, not to be like an old person, but
the good old
it
days.
was, because it immediately spoke to visual people. Like, it was everything Twitter wasn't.
Right.
I hate Twitter. I use it, but it makes me feel like I'm dying. Twitter like just makes me feel like I'm gonna have a panic attack.
I
Instagram is
know
all
exactly what you
images.
mean. Yeah.
Twitter and Facebook are like designed to get people in fights. And
Mm-hmm.
Instagram might be like that now more because they have so many features, but originally it was like, here are these images. And hey, these people make things. And and I started collecting a lot more art because it was accessible to me. Trade, and that's another thing. Like I got to communicate with artists I never thought I would get to communicate with. Like I ended up becoming friends with Camille Rose Garcia, who's a painter, and I used to look at her work in juxtapose when I was like
Yeah.
18. And I thought
Yeah.
she was amazing. And I ended up doing later. I ended up doing events with her and like knowing her, but all because of things on Instagram. And I try to make like my Instagram look nice. Like I think it's important because you have to visually draw someone in because people are so, they don't give much time to anything generally. And so you
Mm-hmm.
got to like kind of get somebody. So you can't be putting up blurry photos or like something that doesn't, I don't know. I mean, that seems simple, but try to balance out how things look when you look at the full page of it and try to keep people engaged by posting stories of things and offering stuff. And I would say to people who are like, had advice to just like reach out to artists and like, in like really like, I don't want to say casual, but like not trying to want anything from somebody. You're not trying
Right.
to get them to promote, like, maybe buy something from them and, then, message them and thank them, or I don't know, sort of to get into a world like that. Like you kind of have to participate in it, and that you try to trade with people, but like do it I think it's how you do stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not bad to be persistent, but don't be a pest.
Yeah.
Like don't don't be people are don't be a jerk. Everybody's, I don't know. Like I just see people behave, well, the way people behave on the internet. I'm just like, who are you? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just find a theme to like, I don't know. I do a certain framing of photos. And I wouldn't say that I'm like, it doesn't feel like I'm that calculated, but I probably am.
Yeah, I think there's some really good advice in there because particularly what you were saying about how you have such little time to capture someone's attention on the
Yeah.
internet. It's I don't even think it's maybe a full second for if somebody sees your work or sees a photo of you or sees you in the studio on an image on Instagram, and then like whether or not you capture that interest and make them think, oh, I want to see more of this.
Right.
It's so tiny. And so therefore, everything you put out needs to be high quality because people don't know you. They only know that image that you've produced and in that moment. And so, I think keeping that consistency and keeping that quality is really important. And interestingly enough, as I'm saying it now, I'm realizing there's a connection there to an art practice as well. So just like
Mm-hmm.
in your Instagram feed or in your stories or anything, make it be good and make it be consistent is kind of, I think, the really good advice for the physical art that people produce as well. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to show people the best stuff you have, or at least the process to the best stuff you have. I don't know. You can do other things too. Like I think that also like you make connections on the internet, and then you can, I don't know. Like I did a thing at one point when I was sort of trying to get up and running, and I would have stickers made, and I would whatever I would like, and this is when I was more like involved in tattoo world. Maybe I would just send free stickers to them and like things, and just with nothing. I wasn't looking for anything in return. I just like,
Mm.
it was sort of like hey, I'm here, like, remember me, I guess, and if you think about me, if you ever want a woodcut, but without like saying it. I don't know if that's really, the same thing as Instagram, but it's tricky. I wonder what it would be like if I had to start something now, because there's so much
Mm-hmm.
noise. But I think, commenting in an intelligent way on like things you like, and just sort of, you kind of do have to spend a bunch of time. I did I'm in the process of doing the speedball takeover this
Oh,
week,
yeah.
which has been really fun. But it always reminds me that I always think social media is sort of easy until I'm like running somebody else's,
Right.
which I've actually never done, but like, or like, you have to, it's like a whole, you have to plan things out for it. And
Yeah, because I think I've found that too with the Pine Copper Lime Instagram and even the Pine Copper Lime interviews, where I've been at it now really consistently for a little over 2 years. And a lot of it just is comes intuitively to me. Like my
right.
brain has laid down the pathways hard enough that I don't have to spend a lot of mental energy coins on it every day.
Yeah.
It's part of my routine. But when I was starting out, I was thinking about it constantly and sort of, what I wanted it to be and what it was communicating. And I think being intentional from the beginning is so important for people. So it's not as much of your messy learning that you can sort of hide behind the curtain.
Sure.
I think the better. And you just need to go into things intentionally and with purpose. And I think that that's, yeah, the best way to do it. And don't be a jerk, as you said.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Don't
just don't be a
don't be a
jerk.
jerk. I think that every day when I look at the internet. I'm like, you could just not do this thing.
Right.
You'd be way better if you just didn't do this thing,
I mean,
but you're doing
especially,
it.
yeah, like as you said with Twitter, I was talking to a friend about it who is a writer, and she's
Mm-hmm.
published, and she just had a big book deal. And Twitter, of course, is huge in the writing world. Like there are
Oh
now
yeah.
people who are saying like, oh, well, you need to have X amount of followers on Twitter before we even look at taking your book on
Oh.
as a possibility to publish, all this kind of stuff. And so she said that she's trying to navigate it. And I was saying, like, every time I go on there, I just feel like it's just a bunch of mean nerds. And like,
Yeah.
definitely a nerd. I was a philosophy major. Like, you don't get nerdier than that. But I feel like I'm kind of a nice nerd. And when I get into the mean nerd category, I just feel like I'm like, I don't get these jokes. I don't understand what you're referencing. Like, you guys are being smart, but in a really mean way to each other, and it's really stressful.
People being nasty, and people being like, it also like exudes like the inability to like, not like they can't enjoy anything, or like they're like highly critical of every single thing. And like, I know that that's sort of like what goes on Twitter, and like being critical is important, but it's just, I mean, it's like the worst of the worst sometimes, and it doesn't take long to find it, because I don't even follow that many people on Twitter. Like, I don't function on Twitter. Like, I've had one for a long time, because there was a feature like 12 years ago. Like, I can't remember how old Twitter is. Maybe it's not that old, but you could talk to somebody. I could text my friend who was teaching in China.
Right.
So like, I had a Twitter because it allowed me free text messaging in China. So then I had this Twitter, it laid dormant forever. Then I would look at it, and I wasn't really like familiar with the app, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. And then I started using it more, maybe the end of last year. So I thought, well, I should be present on all platforms that have any like importance,
Yeah.
because it's another way to announce that you have a sale. It's another way to like exhibit work, but it just doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't. It doesn't appeal to me very much. You do see news that's important. Like, I have gained things from Twitter that maybe I wouldn't otherwise, but I've been more angry than not angry
Yeah.
when I look at
Yeah.
it. and then even when people, because the other layer is that everyone's trying to be funny, and that's fine because they're funny people, but it seems like forced a lot of the time. And I just don't. I'm like I don't like any of this.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This is way off subject, I guess. But but I did notice that Twitter added stories, which they called fleets or something. Yeah, and but it's like the only feature that I'm like, well, I could use this because I could put images up.
Yeah,
because it's just image based. I mean, I guess people are gonna type things and stuff, but like, I don't know. It almost feels like a lost cause when I put like images up on Twitter. I'm just like, nobody cares.
Yeah. I've tried to use it, and I know that some podcasts are really big on Twitter or just only have Twitter accounts and aren't even on Instagram. And it's just, it feels weird and like I'm shouting into the void. And I just don't think that there's really a visual community there. I think it's as much as you can divide people into, the word people and the picture people. I think that as a global society, or those of us who are on the social media and the global society, are really strongly shifting into the two different platforms. And I don't really get a lot of it from Twitter.
No.
And it seems like the default is be funny and be mean. And then
right.
And on Instagram, it's so positive. And not that, as you say, like, not that like mindless positivity is necessarily a good thing. But when I post on Instagram, it automatically goes through to the Pine Copper Lime Facebook. And, inevitably, I always get really positive comments on Instagram that's like, beautiful, amazing, oh, thank you, what an inspiration. And then whenever I get anything weird, it's always on Facebook.
Of course it is. God.
Just somebody being like, oh, I can tell they were looking at Picasso, or just like some weird, like passive-aggressive comment about art. It's like, what?
It's always combative, and like, it's combative and defensive at the same time. Yeah. And like they've been sitting around all day waiting for you to like come for them or something. And you're like, what are you, what is happening right now? Yeah. Like very rarely, Instagram is primarily positive. On occasion, I've had weird people say things, and it'll get to you. I mean, it's gotten to me, and like I've been like, oh man, and I don't know how I don't know how it would be to be somebody that had a huge like a famous person, like where people just rag on them all day. Like I assume that they, put this behind them by the time they're, well known. But I don't know. Yeah, there's really good feedback on Twitter. I mean, some of it's just mindless too, or I mean, not Twitter, on Instagram. But yeah, it's like, I always look at who comments, and like sometimes it's somebody that's like another artist, and I'm like, oh, and maybe I've not seen their work. And I've found more artists through Instagram than I ever did before. It's so much easier. And I try to keep my feed pretty much like solid art.
Speaking of finding artists on Instagram, I found Orville Peck from your Instagram. And I would like to personally thank you with my whole heart, because I feel like he like saved my life in lockdown.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I love Orville Peck. I remember, like, I don't even know how he was already like had some traction. It was like in 2019, and I saw like a photo of him.
Yeah.
And then my friend Brad texted actually my sister and I and was like, hey, check this guy out. And I was like, yeah, I just saw a photo of that guy. I had to know it was up. And I listened to the album and I thought, where has this been all my life?
Exactly.
This is amazing. Like, where did this guy come from? Like, he's got the look. I love that. Like, I love a visual, like a stage look. And he's got the voice to back it and the talent. It was like, and then, he wasn't even as, I mean, he was getting famous right then. And then it was like crazy to see where he And I got to meet him at one point, and I, probably sounded like an idiot, but I made a woodcut of him, and I did it just to because I like the way he looks, and I
Yeah.
like that whole like fringed mask, and I put it on Instagram. And this is the thing that Instagram is good for. You can get the attention of people without being pushy, and I tagged him and everything, and people were like, "Oh, like I want to buy this," and I was like, "I'm not really selling it," and I said, "If he wants it, he can have it."
Yeah.
And so he ended up messaging me and he was like, "Yeah, I'd love it. I would love to
Oh,
have that."
I
And
love
I was like,
that.
"Great." I was like, I'm great. I bought tickets to one of your shows, so I'll bring it." And we got to meet him, and he's a really nice guy, and he was great live.
Oh,
He
that's
was,
so great. Is his speaking voice that same, just like deep, buttery, like non-problematic Johnny Cash miracle?
yeah, he does speak with and it's funny because he's not like, I mean, I guess you think of like deep voices as being like big, giant people,
Uh-huh.
but like he's not like, I can't remember how tall he is, but he does sound like that. And yeah, he's just really nice, and he sounded as good live as he sounds on the record.
Oh,
It was
I love
impressive.
that. I
That was the
love
one
that.
thing that I wasn't sure. I was like, you never know, and he was just as good. And I've loved everything he's put out. It's been keeping he had some releases this year, and that kept me alive with music releases. Like
Yeah.
I really got me through sitting at home, even though I sit at home anyway. But
Definitely. It was, yeah, it was so great. And then I later saw you posted about Alex Cameron, who
oh yeah,
I just have adored like since his first Weird album. And of course now he's kind of blown up and he's dating Jemima
mm-hmm.
Kirk, and that helps anyone get quite famous. And but it was just great to see that you also, yeah. So I was like, I think we have pretty similar tastes, because it's interesting because it's particularly with Orville Peck, something about being an American, not living in America. You
Mm-hmm.
don't get a lot of things to feel proud about. And
True,
I felt
and not
like,
lately
not lately,
either.
yeah. And walking through the streets of Sydney or the streets of Bangkok with Orville Peck in my earphones, like it does give me a sense of place and a sense of pride of America. And I think there's something that's very sort of uniquely American about, there's like country music, but also the rhinestone glitz that Orville
Mm-hmm.
kind of embodies. And then also, open queerness is quite American. It's one of the things that when I've traveled and I've gotten to go other places, I think we think of America being quite conservative in some ways, but actually it's, when it comes to sort of open queerness, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
like gender or sexuality, it's actually so much more present in America than it is in Australia, than it
Mm.
is in most parts of Europe, particularly Southern Europe.
Yeah.
And it is that being over the top and gay and country is just like, this is what I can feel proud to be an American about, you know?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
perfect. I love it. I can't get enough of it, and don't think I'll ever tire of it. And yeah, it is. It's like this, with all the awful stuff going on, and it is nice to know that there's like pieces of things that are good. I guess I know that's not very
Hmm.
eloquent, but puts me at a level of ease to have things like that, to be able to listen to those things.
Absolutely. Feeling just the tension that's been twisting up inside of your body uncoil a little bit. That when
Yeah.
music can do that, it's such a gift for sure. So before we sign off, as we're getting kind of towards our hour recording mark of chatting,
Oh, yes.
I
Hmm.
did want to ask you, because we kept saying like, yeah, just don't be a jerk on in social
Yeah.
media. But you are, of course, DeerJerk. So
I am.
Why that particular name? How did that come about?
That came about because of Instagram. When I went to sign up, I was like, I need a handle. And it wasn't serious or anything. I've always liked the word jerk, in part because when my brother was really young, he's like 12 years younger than me.
Mm.
When he was like 3 or 4, he learned the word jerk, and if he got mad at you, he would like step on your foot
Oh my
and say
gosh.
jerk. He would go jerk. But it wasn't like real aggressive. It was just like this funny. And I mean, the word jerk I think is a funny word because it's not a curse word,
Yeah.
and it's sort of, but it can. I think it has better layers than calling somebody a standard curse word.
It's like it's kind of harsh but also gentle at the same time, which is sort of
Yeah, it's sort
funny.
of old manish in a way, or I don't know. It's just like a funny word to me. And then I like deer in
Mm.
general as animals, and I just sort of like was like, oh, just that'll be my name on there. And I didn't really think about it, but it was kind of perfect because I didn't have any letter, like no, there were no numbers in the name,
Right.
so it
Yeah.
was easy to like read and remember. And people have trouble with my name. Like people don't pronounce my name ever correctly. It's like people get Bryn wrong, they get Parrot wrong. I get why they do. They're not used to. It's an odd name, I guess, and so it was a huge advantage because people would look at my work and they would remember that name. They would remember DeerJerk. So initially, when I'd be somewhere, someone wouldn't call me by my name. They would call me by DeerJerk.
Mm.
They'd be like, "Oh, it's the DeerJerk woodcut person," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and I've just used it since for like branding, I guess. But it was accidental. It's just an Instagram name, and I never changed it, and it's not taken anywhere, so it was easy to get.
Right. Yeah. Get it across platforms and yeah, yeah.
But that would be another thing I would say. If you're gonna pick a name on like social media, make it so that people aren't going like, "What is that?" Like,
Yeah.
how many numbers are in there? Like something that people like, short things. People will remember that because when they're gonna, hey, I want to show you this thing, they can remember and type it in. And yeah, that's where it came from. I just think jerk is a funny word, and it's easy to remember. And people, that's how, like when I've had shows, people ask me, I'm like, well, put my real name in there somewhere, but honestly, you should just use Deer Jerk because I think
Right.
people understand.
Because people will, yeah, Bryn Parrot, and people will be like, "What is it?"
Yeah, and I just
Do
don't.
people try to make your last name French a lot and not
Yeah,
say the T? That would have been my instinct had I not heard you say it. Yeah.
yeah, and I get that, and it became especially bad after the 92 election with Perot, with
Oh
Ross
yeah, yeah.
Perot.
Mm-hmm.
Then I couldn't escape it anymore. It was like solidified. I had close friends who were still saying my name wrong. Like
Yeah.
they like never figured it out, and they would kind of like trail off when they'd say it, which is funny.
Just avoid saying it. I have to say in Thailand, in a language that has 26 vowels, I definitely
Mm.
just kind of avoid saying some friends' names sometimes because it's
You're
like,
like,
I'm like, yeah, so when he told me this thing, and people will be like, who? Him, right?
that
Like,
guy.
yeah, I can't, I'm sorry. I'm working on it, but 26 vowels is a lot of vowels for a native English speaker mouth to get around. Yeah.
Yeah, so I get it. Like I'm so used to my name being from the time I was like a kid. Like, and it was always like people, even my first name, because it's Bryn, and people look at it and they just think Brian.
Oh.
So I remember the army was calling a lot when I turned 18
Yeah.
because I hadn't signed up for the draft.
Oh.
And we were like, my mom finally was like, it's Bryn, it's a woman. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
That's
Um,
hilarious.
I don't know why it wasn't listed somewhere. It seemed like they should have that information, but I don't know.
Yeah, that they're just
Um,
going by the name, but that's
we
funny.
definitely, like growing up, my sister and I and my brother, we all talk about something that my mom used to do on the phone that I do now do on the phone because of our name. is that like anytime I'm like talking to a credit card company or like whatever, they'll be like, "What's your name?" And I'm like, "My name is Bryn, BrynPerrott." Like, and my mom used to do that when she was paying bills and everything. And I realized that a lot of people don't do that, like immediately spell their whole name out.
Yeah.
So we all do that and laugh about it. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's
it's
beautiful.
easier to be DeerJerk.
Yep. Well, DeerJerk, I definitely want to thank you for spending your evening with me.
Yes,
and getting
thank you.
just getting to chat about social media and tattoos and our mutual love of Orville. And I just, I hope that we get a chance to connect sometime in the post-pandemic world. And if your travels, ever take you to Bangkok, we're setting up a little print studio here with the guest room, so you're very welcome. There's plenty of amazing printmaking and tattooing in Bangkok, so we'd be happy to show you around.
I would love that. That would be wonderful, and I would love to try. I just want to go anywhere now. I'm so sick of being home.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing, and it sounds like you've got really cool stuff going on there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So yeah, I really hope you can come visit sometime, and I'll definitely be in touch with everything.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, thank you so much, Bryn. It was great chatting.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when my guest will be Julina Skrowanska. We'll talk about advertisement as art, moving to Japan and discovering the print scene, and opening up her own studio. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.